Okay, so with that, a good day to everyone. I will be discussing the topics on the hygienic milk production. Um, I know that you have a background or knowledge on how to maintain an hygienic or how to maintain a clean, safe, wholesome milk by preparing the dairy animal by proper milking of the animal. So I've discussed that uh, on our past topics. So today I will be discussing more on the details of how to properly produce milk that are hygienic, those milk that are safe, uh, those milk that can be consumed by people. So with that, um, as an introduction, milk and milk products are a rich and convenient source of nutrients for people in many countries, and international trade of milk-based commodities is significant. So we know that milk and the other milk products are an important input on many industries. So these milk and milk products, they are a good source of nutrients, especially to people that, especially to like, for example, the United States, wherein milk is consumed in large amounts. So these milk and milk products contain nutrients that are needed by the body in order for it to become productive, in order for it to stay healthy. And then another one is that um, the milk and the milk products are imported or exported to other countries, which contributes to the economic growth of that country. So the international trade for milk-based commodities is significant. So, with that, all foods have the potential to cause foodborne illness, and milk products are no exception. So, all of the food that, or all of the things that we consume have the potential or have the chance that it will be contaminated. So, it can have like a foodborne illness. So, milk and milk products, just like any other food, have also that potential to cause foodborne illness. So dairy animals may carry human pathogens, and these pathogens present present in milk may increase the risk of causing foodborne illness. So moreover, the milking procedure, subsequent pooling, and the storage of milk carry the risk of further contamination from man or the environment or growth of inherent pathogens. So throughout the production of the milk, from its harvesting until its storage, uh, to its transport, until its processing, all of it have the potential to cause contamination to that milk and its subsequent products. So because of that, um, the risk is high. The risk is high for contamination, either through the contamination brought about by demand, by the one that handling the milk, by the environment, or by the equipment where the milk has gone to. So, as such, um, it can cause contamination, and this contamination that may be caused by pathogens can increase the risk of causing foodborne illness. Further, the composition of many of the milk products makes them good media for the outgrowth of pathogenic microorganisms. Since I mentioned that milk contains a lot of nutrients, these nutrients can also be used or can also be utilized by bacteria, by pathogenic microorganisms for their growth, for their multiplication. So, because of that, you can consider the milk as susceptible to the or it has higher chances to be contaminated because of its composition. So potential also exists for the contamination of milk with residues of veterinary drugs, pesticides, and other chemical contaminants. So aside from the pathogenic microorganisms that can contaminate the milk, um, there is also some contamination that can come from, like for example, veterinary drugs, like for example, um, antibiotics, and then also with pesticides. If you happen to uh, conduct pest control to that dairy animal, maybe some of the residues of that pesticide can go into the milk, and then other chemical contaminants that are usually used um, indirectly to the milk, but some of those residues can go or can contaminate the milk. Therefore, implementing the proper hygienic control of milk and milk products throughout the food chain is essential to ensure the safety and suitability of these foods for their intended use. So, because of that, we need to have like an hygienic control. So, we need to follow some protocols in order for the milk and other milk products to be safe for consumption. So because of that milk should not contain any contaminant at a level that jeopardizes the appropriate level of public health protection when presented to the consumer. So anong ibig sabihin lang yan? Milk should not contain any contaminants. If it is achievable, it should be 0%. Or if it is not, it should be as low as possible that it should not harm the one that is consuming that milk, or that the one that is consuming that milk product. So it should not contain contaminants. So there is an important influence of the production system that the milk undergone to on the safety of the milk products as well as the milk itself. So there are the potential of the microbes, the microbiological contamination from all of the sources in the production system. So because of that, the contamination should be minimized. Um, it is recognized that there is microbiological hazards can be introduced both from the farm itself, where the animal is originated, from the farm environment, and then from the milking of the animal themselves. So there should be an appropriate animal husbandry practices. So we need to follow a certain protocols, practices, um, in order to assure that the um, milk that is produced by these dairy animals is safe for human consumption. So, furthermore, the animal feeding, veterinary practices, as well as uh, inadequate general hygiene of the milking personnel, as well as the cleanliness of the equipment, um, as well as the inappropriate milking methods. These are all some factors that can lead to the contamination, either by biological factors or even chemical factors, on the milk itself, and subsequently the milk products that it will be produced. So because of that, we need to follow certain rules, certain protocols in order to minimize the contamination. So, contamination of milk from animal and environmental sources during primary production should be minimized. So, because of that, we need to focus, or we need to go back into the farm itself, um, not only on the transport or storage or processing of the milk. We need to focus uh, first on the um, farm itself and the environmental sources during the primary production in the farm that can cause these contaminants. So this should be minimized. So because of that, um, like for example, the microbiological load of milk should be as low as achievable using good milk production practices, taking into account the technological requirement for subsequent processing. So we need to focus first on the milk, the whole milk or the fresh milk that you harvested from the dairy animal. So it should be low as achievable, meaning the microbes, the microorganisms, even if it is not harmful to the human, all of the microorganisms, the microbial load should be as low as achievable. So in reality, you cannot actually remove 100% all of the microorganisms that is in the milk. So as low as achievable, then that's the goal. That's the goal of the dairy producer. So how do we achieve it? Using good milk production practices, taking into account the technological requirements for subsequent processing. So you need to look into or adapt into a good milk production practices. So last topics on the milking management, I've discussed like how do you prepare the dairy animal in order to minimize contamination, like for example cleaning the teats, cleaning the hind legs, performing stripping, performing pre-dipping on the teats in order to minimize contamination. Those are good milk production practices. So if you do not practice, if currently you do not practice that uh, good milk production practices on your farm, then you need to adapt. You need to change how you handle the animal, how you harvest the milk, in order to achieve the goal of low microbial load on the milk. So there are measures that should be implemented at the primary production level to reduce the initial load of pathogenic microorganisms and microorganisms that can affect safety and suitability um, of the milk. So, um, with that, water and other environmental factors should be managed in a way that minimizes the potential for the transmission directly or indirectly of hazards into the milk. So aside from the production system that you are doing, wherein you need to change, you need to adapt in order to minimize the microbial load, one thing more that you need to focus on is the water and other environmental factors that may have the potential to contaminate the milk. So with that contaminated water, and for example, like for example pests such as insects and rodents, as well as chemicals and other internal and external environments where the animals are housed and milked, these are all the factors that may contaminate feed. It may contaminate equipment or milking animals, that will lead eventually to the introduction of contaminants or hazard into the milk. So, because of that, we need to also focus on these factors, not only on the milk itself, not only on the animal itself, but also on factors such as the water, the pest control that you do, the chemicals, the as well as the internal and external environments provided by the housing of the animals. All of these factors may lead to contamination indirectly uh, to the milk. So it may cause contamination directly to the feed, to the animal itself, and then eventually this will lead to the introduction of contaminants or hazard into the milk itself. So aside from the production system, you need to focus on the water and the environmental factors. Because of that, areas including premises used for the production of milk should be designed, situated, maintained, and to the extent practicable used in a manner that minimizes the introduction of hazards into the milk. So because of that, we need to look into the areas um, that wherein there is the areas wherein um, the animals go into. So, like for example, areas in the milking parlor, the pen or the house of the dairy animal, all of it should be looked into, uh, wherein the design, where it is situated, how it is maintained, should also be looked into in order to minimize the introduction of hazards into the milk. So aside from the areas that we need to look into, the housing of the animal, the health itself of the animal should also be looked into, um, in order to ensure a safe harvest or safe production of milk. So the health status of milking animals and herd should be managed in a manner that addresses the hazards of concerns for human health. So because of that, milk should come from animals in good health so that, considering the end use, it does not adversely affect the safety and suitability of the end product. Meaning, the milk itself has some effect on the production of safe and wholesome milk. So usually, because of the presence of pathogens on a sick animal, this may contaminate the milk itself. So it is important to prevent the spread of these diseases, especially zoonotic diseases, among animals and from animals to milk. So yeah, it is important that we need to prevent the spread from animal to animal or from the animal to milk. So, milk and milk products produced from milk obtained from certain diseased animals has been known to be neither safe nor suitable for human consumption. So, if you um, if you have a sick dairy animal and um, you forcibly harvest its milk, um, this can have a higher chance to be contaminated because the animal that you harvested the milk from is sick. So maintenance of healthy milking animals has been shown to reduce the likelihood that human pathogens will be introduced into the milk via the mammary gland or from the feces. So we need to maintain a good and healthy animal. We need to maintain a clean and healthy animal, dairy animal, in order to reduce any pathogens, any microorganisms that can cause contamination to the milk. So, um, with consideration given to the end use of milk, aside from the health itself, forage and feed for lactating animals should not introduce directly or indirectly contaminants into milk in amounts that present an unacceptable health risk to the consumer or adversely affect the suitability of milk or milk products. So, aside from the health of the animal, the forage as well as the feed that the lactating animals, the dairy animals, are consuming should also be free from contaminants, should also be free from bacteria that may cause contamination to the milk and adversely may affect the health of the consumer or may affect the quality and suitability of the milk for consumption. So, um, because of that, you look into the feed that you are giving to the animal. So, the forages, the grasses, the concentrate should be devoided or it should not contain any contaminants that may indirectly influence or may indirectly affect the quality, the safety of the milk that will be consumed by the human. So, aside from that, pests should be controlled and in a way that does not result in unacceptable levels of residues such as pesticides in the milk. So aside from the feed that you are giving, then on the pest control itself, like for example, you get rid of flies that are on the um, cow itself or on the dairy animal itself, and then you are using pesticides or insecticides to control the pest. So you should use or you should uh, apply these pesticides or insecticides in a manner that will not contaminate the milk that you are harvesting. So residues of pesticides may go into the milk, and if it is high enough or it may reach an unacceptable level, then this may cause harm to the one that is consuming it, because because that milk will now contain pesticides. So pests such as insects and rodents are also known to be vectors of diseases. Uh, Improper application of these pest control chemicals used to control these pests may introduce chemical hazard into the production environment. So, as much as possible, yes, it is important, it is given that you need to control pests in your animals, because these pests can introduce diseases, and then that disease may eventually contaminate the milk. Yes, it is important that you need to control the pest, but you need to do it in such a manner that the residues that from the pesticides or insecticides that you are using may not go into the milk, or it should not go into the milk, in order for to ensure a safe consumption, in order to ensure that the milk that the human is consuming is safe to actually drink or actually consume. So you need to look into the proper way on how to use these pesticides or insecticides. So with that, aside from pest control, you should also look into veterinary drugs. So animals should only be treated with veterinary drugs authorized by the competent authority for the specific use, and in a manner that will not adversely impact on the safety and suitability of the milk, including adherence to the withdrawal period specified. So that's one thing that you need to look into, the veterinary drugs. So again, it is also important that you need to um, like give drugs, medicines, veterinary drugs to the dairy animal in order to cure it of its disease, in order to prevent disease from manifesting from the animal. So um, it is equally important. But again, just like in the pest control, we need to manage, or we need to do this, the supplementation or addition, giving these veterinary drugs to the animals in a safe and controlled manner. So, like for example, we need to follow the correct amount of veterinary drugs to use in a specific animal on its specific weight. We need to follow the direction of that veterinary drugs that we are using, especially the withdrawal period. So the milk from animals that have been treated with veterinary drugs uh, can be transferred, that it can be transferred to milk should be discarded appropriately until the withdrawal period specified for the particular veterinary drug has been achieved. So the withdrawal period is important, or um, it is important to follow the withdrawal period, because any milk that was harvested within that withdrawal period um, may contain traces, residues of these veterinary drugs. Now, because of that, if you consume it, then you are also consuming that veterinary drug in small amounts only. But if you continue to do this, there is still a contamination of these veterinary drugs. Eventually, it will build up. So you will consume a lot of these veterinary drugs. So as much as possible, we need to follow the withdrawal period. So usually, this is important, like for example, for antibiotics. So, like for example, you give an antibiotic to the dairy animal. Now, you did not follow the withdrawal period for that antibiotic. So, usually the withdrawal period is around 15 days. So, you did not follow that. You put or you inject antibiotic to the dairy animal, and then um, um, the next morning you harvested its milk, and then you process that milk. You sell that milk. You sold that milk, and then someone consumed that milk. There is a possibility, or there is a higher chance that the milk that was consumed has residues, has contamination of antibiotics. Now, if you do this often, and then that same person is consuming that milk that is contaminated with the milk that you are harvesting that is contaminated with antibiotic, eventually that person will build up or will consume enough antibiotic that it will trigger antibiotic resistance. So because of that, it can be detrimental to that person because it will develop antibiotic resistance. So now there will be a problem. Comes the time that that person really needs to take in antibiotics because it has developed antibiotic resistance from drinking too much contaminated milk with antibiotics in it. If comes the time that that person really needs to take in antibiotic to treat a disease, there is a higher chance that it will not be treated, or there will be a higher chance that that disease will not be treated through those antibiotics because uh, that person developed antibiotic resistance from the milk that it was consuming. So as much as possible, we need to follow if you are giving veterinary drugs to the dairy animal, we need to follow certain procedures, certain rules, especially withdrawal period, in order to produce safe, wholesome milk that is safe to consume to the consumers. Residues of veterinary drugs in milk should not exceed levels that would present an unacceptable risk to the consumer. So that is what I'm talking about. That like for example, that antibiotic may cause antibiotic resistance and eventually can be harmful or detrimental to the person. So the improper use of veterinary drugs has been shown to result in potentially harmful residues in milk and milk products and may affect the suitability of milk intended for the manufacture of cultured products. So, aside from that, aside from the drugs itself, milking should be carried out in such a manner that minimizes contamination of the milk being produced. So, um, because of that, the milking procedure that you are carrying out should be in a manner that minimizes contamination of the milk. So, last topics I've discussed the proper milking procedure, the milking management that you need to do before you actually harvest the milk, the milking procedure that you need to do, milk management that you need to do during the harvesting of the milk, as well as the milking procedure or milking management that you need to do after you have harvested the milk. So all of the necessary protocols, steps, procedures that you need to do in milking the animal should be followed in such a way that it will minimize the contamination of the milk. With consideration given to the end use of the milk handling, storage, and transfer of milk should be conducted in a manner that will avoid contamination and minimize any increase in the microbiological load of the milk. So, proper handling, storage, and transport of milks are important elements of the system of controls necessary to produce safe and suitable milk and milk products. So, contact with unsanitary equipment and foreign materials are known causes of milk contamination. So, temperature abuse is known to increase the microbiological load of the milk. So, all of these factors, unsanitary equipment that may be caused on that can cause contamination should be looked into. From the handling, storage, and transport, all of the equipment should be um, clean, should be sanitized in order not to contaminate the milk, as well as on how you transport the milk, the temperature inside the container van, the temperature inside the transport vehicle should be regulated in order not to spoil or in order not to contaminate the milk. So, with that, milking equipment should be designed, constructed, and installed, maintained, and used in a manner that will avoid the introduction of contaminants into the milk. So, it should be in a manner that um, the equipments that are used should be designed in a manner that will not allow any contamination to go into the milk. So it should be constructed, installed in such a way that it will not allow any contamination that will go into the milk, and it should be maintained in a manner that uh, the equipment should run efficiently and smoothly in order not to contaminate the milk. So milking equipment should be operated furthermore in a manner that will avoid damage to other and teats, and that will avoid the transfer of disease between animals through the milking equipment. So it should be operated, this milking animal should be operated in such a way that we need to avoid damage to the other or the teats. The damage to the other and the teats may eventually lead to infection, and that infection, because of the uh, bacteria that may be present in that infection, then it can potentially contaminate the milk. So, as much as possible, if you are using any equipment or if you are handling the milk, then it should be in a manner that will not contaminate, that will not damage the teeth or the other, and then eventually it should be in a manner that should not um, indirectly will contaminate the milk. So, aside from the milking equipments, milking facilities, the milk storage tanks and cans should be designed, constructed, maintained, and used in a manner that will avoid the introduction of contaminants into the milk and minimize the growth of microorganisms in milk. So, after you harvest it, then usually you store the milk. So, the tanks, the containers where you store the milk should be designed in a way, constructed in a way that it will not allow any outside contamination. So it also need to be cleaned and sanitized in order not to allow any contamination while storing the milk. So premises for the storage of milk and milking related equipment should be situated, designed, constructed, maintained, and used in a manner that avoids the introduction of contaminants into the milk. So, aside from the storage equipments, the facilities itself, the area where you keep those containers um, should be situated in a or designed or constructed in a way that it will not pose any contamination, or there will be no threats of contamination. And lastly, milk should be collected, transported, and delivered without undue delay, because usually milk can spoil fast and in a manner that avoids the introduction of contaminants into milk and minimize the growth of microorganisms in the milk. So because of that, we need to properly transport it in the correct temperature, should be transported without delay in order not to introduce any contaminants into the milk, and in order for us to minimize any microorganisms that are already present in the milk from multiplying. So those are the some of the general principles that you need to apply, primarily principles that you need to apply on the production of milk. So later on, we will discuss more on the um, end products, or on the end products itself of the milk, and the specific procedures or steps that you need to conduct in order to ensure that the milk that you are using is hygienic. So with that, that ends our video lecture for this day. So thank you for listening.